We come from all walks of life, but our shared beliefs and values help shape a strong county, state, and nation where every citizen has the opportunity to succeed. We believe that government must serve all of the people, not just the rich or influential.
Hi, welcome to the third edition of the Wayne County Democrats. It's a new day. I'm Karen Chasteen, Vice Chair of the Wayne County Democrats. We have two guests today, John Zody, who's the chair of the Indiana Democratic Party, and Trent Deckard, who is the Democratic member of the Indiana Elections Division of the Secretary of State's office. Much information has been discussed and presented about the beginnings of the local party and the party values and what it means to be a Democrat. But today we've asked Mr. Zody to come over and tell us about the direction of the state party, how we fit in nationally, locally, all the ins and outs. John?
Thank you, Karen, and thank the people of Wayne County. And we're in a beautiful facility here and appreciate being asked to come over and share some thoughts with the Wayne County and the greater Richmond community. Really where the state Democratic Party is now is our candidates are out spreading a message all across the state that we can do a lot better here in Indiana. In each of our 92 counties, we have candidates running up and down the ballot from township up to the courthouse offices who are talking about local services and the impact what happens at the state has on those services. Then we move to the state legislature, where our legislative candidates all over the state are talking about the things that are important to Hoosiers at the State House, things we should be focusing on during the legislative session, getting away from divisive social issues and talking about the Hoosier economy and the wage inequality between men and women, where we are on education, all these things that we should be talking about, moving right up to our statewide candidates, our candidates for Secretary of State, for State Auditor, State Treasurer, and then of course our candidates for Congress who will be elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in November.
So they've got a united message.
We do, and that is really that we can do better. When women in Indiana make about 73 cents on the dollar for every dollar a man makes. When we see what's happening with the governor just about a year ago creating a new wasteful agency of government that is trying to undermine what our democratically elected superintendent of public instruction, Glenda Ritz, has been trying to do, all the way to the numbers that we're seeing lately that more than a quarter of Hoosier children are living in poverty, and it's those children are being raised in some instances by a single mother who is having to work more than one job that because she's being paid a wage that she can't survive on. Right. So we're talking about raising the minimum wage and those kind of things that should be talked about in the General Assembly in each session. And unfortunately, the governor and the Republican supermajorities have left a lot of Hoosiers in the cold. Well,
some of the issues that I know are facing our local people are the insurance, the Medicaid, the Medicare, whatever it is that the governor wants to call it. How do we feel about that? I mean, it's something that should have been done, I think, in the beginning when the Affordable Health Care Act was enacted.
Right.
What's your thoughts?
Well, when the Affordable Care Act was passed, states were given the option to create a health care exchange. Indiana decided not to do that under Governor Daniels. Governor Pence came in office, also decided not to create one, and then let the deadline lapse about what the state's alternative was, all the while trying to look at expanding a health care program here in Indiana, but at the same time leaving out in the cold 350,000 Hoosiers who could not get health care, access to affordable health care. Now we're seeing that process of the program he wants to expand still coming into shape. We're not sure where exactly it's going to go. The federal government has told him he needs to go back and do some more homework on that before it can take place. Hoosiers need to know that their government is looking out for them, that they're safe, that they need to be able to send their kids to school, and that a lot of our health care costs in the past have come from the fact that when some people are ill, they'll go to the emergency room because they don't have access to a primary care physician. And the governor has basically said it's okay if you go to an emergency room. You can't send your kid to school sick. You can't go to work if your child is sick. So having access to affordable health care is critically important if the economy in Indiana is going to continue to move forward and Hoosiers can have a good quality of life. And that's here in Richmond and Wayne County all the way up in a lot of our other 92 counties.
Right. Well, you touched on education earlier. Will you talk a little bit about what's going on with our superintendent of education and what you feel should happen?
Sure. Well, of course, in the year 2012, she was elected and defeated our former superintendent of public instruction. She had a clear mandate. She received 1.3 million votes, more than Governor Pence received on election day. And from day one, Governor Pence and his administration have been making concerted effort to undermine her authority, and there are substantive things to talk about there. It's not just a political party chairman saying that the governor is out to get Superintendent Ritz. He created an entirely new agency of state government that at each and every State Board of Education meeting there are actions taken to really dismantle the Department of Education and her ability to enforce and administer state law, which is her job to do. And so every single state board meeting, when she's been focused on policy and trying to do what we call the Hoosier Family of Readers program, which is one of her big initiatives as a former media specialist for about 30 years. So we are constantly seeing the education discussion in Indiana move toward politics and away from policy, and that's just a complete disservice to students in Indiana.
You discussed or talked or touched on the $2 billion surplus at a meeting the other night, and how we got there, and at the backs of our poverty-stricken families or lower income, and I really think that's an important thing for people to understand.
Right. Well, it is, and when you look at one piece of legislative history, if you will, a few years ago, the General Assembly cut $300 million out of K through 12 education, and it was never restored. There are roads and bridges across Indiana that are crumbling. The governor just authorized some money to be spent on transportation. Our Democratic friends in the State House advocated for more money to go to fix those bridges and roads and create jobs while doing so. So as that state surplus was built, we saw other services getting cut. One of the main things we've seen in the last couple of weeks is that the state is now being sued because it has refused to pay the necessary subsidies to Hoosier families who have adopted special needs children.
Right.
The governor has decided to free up $10 million to provide to those families, but at the same time, the Department of Child Services, which administers that, has reverted $240 million back into the state's coffers, in theory, to build that surplus. So Hoosier families, exactly. Hoosier families are again being left out in the cold when they should have been given the necessary subsidies that will help them take care of those kids with special needs. The Bureau of Motor Vehicles also under a legal proceeding because they knowingly overcharged Hoosiers to the tune of $30 million over a number of years. And so these are things we're seeing. Where did that money go? Did it go to help build the surplus? And really, what is the motivation besides fiscal responsibility, which the governor seems to have his own definition of? What is the goal behind the surplus? Is this political motivation for 2016, or there are a lot of questions out there that could still be answered about the state surplus?
Right. Can you think of anything else you'd like to just point out that I haven't thought of?
Well, I think it's important to point out, I've shared some contrasts that the Democratic Party in Indiana has with our current state administration. It's important to note that in addition to talking about what we think can be better, it's talking about what Democrats are for. We have candidates all over the state for, like I said, township office, county office, legislative office, Congress, statewide office. We're talking about what they're for. And what we're for is making sure Hoosier children have access to early education through universal pre-K. Right. We are interested in making sure that families have what they need through raising the minimum wage and helping create jobs and getting people back to work who have been unemployed for a period of time. So we've got to talk about what we're for, not just what can be better in Indiana, but what Democrats are for, and those are the things we're talking about up through November 4th and beyond.
Right. That was one thing that we looked at when we were doing some values last year. We wrote them all down. What do Democrats stand for? What does it mean to be a Democrat?
Exactly.
Because people don't know. What is
Right.
the difference between the two parties? And if anybody wants to look at it at WayneCounty89.com, we have it on our website. And it's been a pretty popular piece of paper
Right.
that people
That's
have
great.
called us, asked questions about at our events. We put it on a bookmark, and they really read it, and they
Right.
come back and say, wait a minute, let's talk about this. And it's
important.
great. It's
It is.
very important.
Very much
yes.
so.
Now, we also have Trent Deckard, who's with the Indiana Elections Division with the Secretary of State. There have been some changes in election law, some things that maybe are going on that we don't quite understand, but it could be good. So, Trent, would you like to talk about some of that?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you so much for having me. I hope certainly this is helpful for your viewers that have questions about election law, and that hopefully we can answer some of those questions. First, I want to say I serve as co-director there at the State Election Division. It is a bipartisan agency, so voters can always know that there's bipartisan election administration in the state of Indiana, just as they have at the county level with the county election board
Right.
and the representation that they're seeing at the poll sites. We have had some significant changes to Indiana election law. We have a new statewide voter registration form that is significantly different than previous versions. This current statewide voter registration form has three things that a voter should be aware of. Number one, at the bottom, there's a certified statement of acceptance if third parties receiving that from a person applying and then planning on turning that into the county clerk. So folks will want to make sure that they're paying attention to that. The second thing is that it has a receipt that you provide to the voter for them to keep. And then the third thing is that there's a noon 10-day turnaround time for that form to be turned in. Now that's the state form, and I often point out to groups that we currently still have available the federal form. And the federal form, we're hearing feedback that the federal form is more popular between the two, because the federal form does not have a certified statement of acceptance, and it does not have the receipt that you provide back to the voter. The person receiving it should still turn that form around as quickly as possible. I would even say noon 10 days is waiting too long. Get that in so that voter can get registered and into the system and start participating as soon as they become a qualified voter. But it's very important people understand there are two forms out there, and that the federal form is an acceptable form established by the federal government.
Right. We're using that in Wayne County, or at least the Democrats are. We always have them available at any of our booths, at any event, any fair. We've had good success with it, and we've even gone a step further that we'll make a copy of it, and we'll keep that in our files after it's been stamped. So if there's any question on Election Day, we've got a stamped copy of it. And the same thing with absentee ballots. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, the applications?
Absolutely. The absentee application is slightly different in the sense that at the top of the application now, whereas before you'd have a number that would be hard to decipher, it now says ABS mail. That's for people that want that ballot to come by mail. The second form that changed with that is one that says ABS Traveling Board, for those folks that want a bipartisan traveling board to visit them and they're confined due to injury, illness, taking care of a relative with an injury or illness. And those things need to be turned around as well if you're receiving it by noon 10 days. One of the things I want to make sure all the folks know about is if you want to register to vote online, you can certainly do that too. IndianaVoters.com is a website maintained by the state of Indiana that will literally, for those voters that have a state identification card or driver's license, it will allow them to register online. It'll process overnight to the county, and the county can then follow up to send you out your voter acknowledgement card, just as a paper form would do.
Right.
So there's really, for registration purposes, there's those three devices: a state form, the federal form, which you're all using and has become very popular and in use, and then there's IndianaVoters.com that allows an individual to do it from home. We find all across the state there are folks that like each of those in different ways, and certainly I would encourage folks to explore
Well, and
that.
at the license branch also, they can still register there, can't they?
Absolutely.
Right.
As part of the National Voter Registration Act, or better known as Motor Voter, there are folks that when they're dealing with a full service agency like the Bureau of Motor Vehicle, they're being offered the chance to register to vote as required by federal and state law. It's very important that folks take advantage of that when it's given to them.
This isn't necessarily something that we're doing in Indiana, but how do you feel about being able to vote at home on a computer?
Yeah.
I know that that's kind of a up and coming thing.
You know, it's an amazing thing how much technology is affecting how we vote. And my background comes from not so much election administration, but more management, dealing with the retail industry and other small business. And the thing that I notice is our voters are encountering technology at all different levels. We're getting the news, we're emailing, we're using all of these things from a phone. Currently, under both federal and state law, our military soldiers overseas, they utilize voting by email and by fax as part of the process to help get that ballot to us on a quicker basis. If I had to make a prediction as we move forward in the future and election administrators and the legislature and policymakers are talking about reducing election costs, I think we're going to continue to see discussions on how we can deliver that ballot. I always tell folks, I believe, and I may be wrong on this, but I believe 40 to 50 years or less, you will wake up in the morning, you'll be told electronically what bills you have due, and it'll remind you today is your last day to vote. And if you want to, you may enter the secure website of the county clerk.
That would be very nice, I think. I like the idea. I didn't like the satellite voting at first. I really like that 6 o'clock in the morning and hear ye, the polls are open. But I think they still do that on election day.
They do.
I always vote absentee, so I've not seen it lately. But we have found that the satellite voting has been very good for us. And people don't even miss the old precincts.
Well, I looked up online before I came here today, and in your last primary, while the county had 11% turnout, which is unfortunately very low, but it's happening right now. Remember, folks, there's an election coming up on November 4th. But while you had that, 45% of your voters used either early voting by absentee or a satellite location. That's nearly half of what you did. So there's several reasons why this is good for the county. First, when you opened on election day, there was less pressure on your polling places or your vote center locations. If you think about it, they open between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And like any business or window of opportunity, there's only so many people that can go through there. So as administrators, we have to encourage satellite opportunities, voting by mail, and other abilities that reflect what the voter needs, and a little bit less rigid than our 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Right. I really like it, and if counties are out there and they're hesitating, I think they ought to try it. And I think they'd find they love it. You and I were talking before the program about the postcards that people receive and if they're still eligible to vote if they haven't voted in a few elections. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. As mandated by state law, some voter list maintenance activities have been underway. And we often find that when these things happen, a couple different reactions happen. Folks either get discouraged and they walk away from the process, or they don't take advantage of the process to do what they need to do to get their registration accurate. And so what has happened is your viewers have received received a postcard from the Indiana Election Division. The first postcard was informational only. And so if a viewer is looking at that and asks them to do nothing at all, they are fine. They can take that information. It tells them about indianavoters.com and pass that to a friend. However, if they received a second postcard, and this postcard went for those folks where that first one was returned, that second postcard would ask them for some follow-up information. It asked them if they no longer reside at their address that's listed there on the card, or if they've moved and need to update, or third, if they wish to cancel that outright. And so folks should have taken advantage of that. If they have not, it's okay, here's the next process. They can right now go to indianavoters.com and update their registration, verify their registration, check their status. If they're not comfortable with the internet, as so many viewers may not be, they can certainly call the county voter registration office and inform them of the situation. They can visit the library, get a voter registration form, and update at that point. If they still did nothing, and I know there's folks out there like that, I have some family members near and dear to my heart as we talk about these things, but if they still do nothing at all, and they're still otherwise qualified at that address on that postcard, they can show up on election day. And they are what's called an inactive voter. That does not mean they can't vote. It just means they're going through a process over 2 full election cycles by which they could be canceled if they don't take any activity. So folks need to make sure they verify their registration, update it when they need to do it when you move, and also make sure you vote. Voting keeps you healthy on the registration rolls.
And keeps our nation healthy.
Absolutely.
The Voter Activation Network, will that be indicated in that so that we know if someone is inactive and we can talk to them and say, hey, remind them a little bit?
There'll be a variety of different ways that those folks can be captured, so that so that information, so folks can follow up. And certainly, any of your viewers or any activists, legal women voters, all those folks out there, this is a good and healthy time to tell people that we have until October 6th, the end of October 6th, to get those registrations updated and get that accurate.
Well, we're already going door to door, talking to people, getting registrations, but I'll give them a couple of phone numbers. With our county courthouse at the voter registration, it would be 973-9226, and they're very helpful. Or you could call me, 969-1309, and I'll do what I can to find out the information you need. Anything else?
Well, that's you've captured it very well. The only other thing I would say is we have a tendency in the election world to think the election is far, far away.
It's not.
It's not. Ballots are being proved. We're getting near the final process, and by law, to get ballots to our military voters, ballots will begin going out on September 20th.
Wow.
So voting will begin then. I always tell candidates and those interested, now's your time, because you never know who might have cast a vote for you already or not. So it's underway.
Okay. John, do you have anything else you'd like to throw in there?
No, I think it's important that we have people like Trent who are helping
he's
protect
wonderful.
our right to vote.
Yes.
People here in Wayne County being the stewards of that right here locally, making sure that right to vote is protected and secured, and making sure that we're making it easy for people to go vote.
I have both of you on speed dial. Just a couple of reminders. The next meeting of the Wayne County Democratic Central Committee will be September 10th at 6 o'clock at Lakeview Restaurant in Cambridge City. And our softball tournament will be on September 27th at Clear Creek. And for more information about that, you can call Kelly Cruz Nicholson at 765-365-5432. That's all I have. I am so grateful that you both could come. Thank you so much.
Grateful for being asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it so much.
And that's all till the next time.